Okay, so today we have a new guitar that I recently added to my personal collection, which is a American Vintage 2 1961 Stratocaster. So if you've been watching my videos at all, you probably noticed that I favor an HSS style Strat guitar whenever I'm demoing tones and things like that. Usually I use this guitar. This is a John Page classic. They don't make these anymore, but John Page used to have a line of guitars that were built in Japan. They're pretty good instruments. You can pick them up used for somewhere in the $750, $800 range. I did swap out the neck pickup for a Sir, but other than that, it's a guitar that served me pretty well. But I've been thinking recently that I wanted to invest in kind of a good Stratocaster. It's kind of turned into my main guitar, and I was ready to spend some money again. You know, I've owned higher priced instruments in the past, but over the last 5 years or so, I've kind of shied away from it, mostly because I tend to do what Keith on 5-Watt World calls catch and release. I tend to cycle through guitars quite a bit. Either I get a guitar and I keep it for a little while and I sell it, or if I'm going to keep it, I tend to mod it, kind of like I did on this John Page. Swap out the pickups, maybe change the bridge, electronics, that kind of stuff. And so I wanted to invest in kind of a quality Stratocaster, and I was kind of getting myself ready to spend the money for that. You know, this guitar was definitely one of the models I was thinking about. I was also considering, hey, maybe I can look at a Nash guitar, or maybe even spend the money to get a Sir Classic S. Basically, looking for that kind of $2,000 to $4,000 range. So not quite getting into Fender Custom Shop, but wanting to spend money on a quality instrument. Not that you can't get a good instrument for under $2,000, but I was ready to kind of invest in something. And so it just so happened that Sweetwater ran a deal on this guitar as a demo, and they had a really deep discount on it, so I went ahead and pulled the trigger. And I've had this maybe for about 6 weeks now, and I'm pretty happy with it. And I figured today we'll go through it, talk about the ins and outs of it, what few things I might change or mod in the future, but kind of talk about my general sense of the instrument. So if you're not familiar with this guitar, the American Vintage series is built to mimic, the classic specs of those guitars in the past. Not 100%, but in a lot of ways. So this guitar is a alder body. It does have a nitro finish, although from what I've read, there is a poly finish on the wood itself to seal the wood, and then there's a nitro finish on top of it. So it's not quite exactly like it used to be. You've got your regular kind of vintage bridge. You've got vintage voice pickups that are meant to mimic that kind of 61 kind of range. So not quite getting into that 63, 64 range that maybe a Silver Sky is targeting at. These are a little bit different. You've got a 5-way switch and volume tone for these two pickups, and then this tone for the bridge. So they did keep a few kind of modern appointments. In 1961, you did not have a 5-way switch. It was a 3-way switch. And in 1961, the bridge pickup did not have a tone control. Other than that, the body's pretty straightforward. It did come with 3 springs. I ended up adding a couple extra springs just because I like having 5 springs for a good amount of tension, mostly because I don't use a tremolo very much. For the neck, you've got a rosewood slab fretboard with the vintage tall frets and the clay dot inlays. You've got the 7 1/4 inch radius. You've got, a tinted maple neck to make it kind of look older. You've got the vintage tuners and a somewhat vintage style string tree. I think the vintage ones maybe were a little different than this. I don't know that they had the peg. I think they were just the metal part. And so in terms of weight, this guitar I think was 7 pounds, 14 ounces. So given that it was under 8 pounds, that was kind of, I think, the best you can expect these days from an American Fender. Many of these hover around that 8-pound range. So finding one that was under that was good enough for me. The other thing I'll say is the neck is a little beefier than I expected. And mostly that was because in a lot of the reviews I saw, people were talking about how the neck was kind of small and thin and thinner than they expected. And when I got this guitar, I expected it to feel maybe more like my Jason Isbell Telecaster, which kind of has a pretty small neck. This one, it's not big by any stretch of the imagination, definitely not kind of that 50s neck, but I think because it has that C shape to it, it feels a little beefier kind of up here around the shoulders a little bit. It's not super thick, but the C shape gives a little more girth than I was expecting. So again, it's not a big neck by any stretch of the imagination, but if you've been seeing reviews and you haven't been liking the people saying, oh, it's a thin neck, and you're like, I don't want a thin neck, I would not let that keep you from this guitar. I don't think it's too thin in any way, shape, or form. So one main thing I wish they had not kept vintage is that the truss rod adjustment is at the heel of the neck, which means you got to take the neck off in order to adjust the truss rod. I don't get it. I don't really understand why you would do that. It makes it so much more difficult to set up the guitar. I know some people have an aesthetic issue with having the truss rod adjustment up here, but I think functionally it's just so superior. I don't know why they kept that. You know, like I said, they didn't keep the three-way switch. They didn't keep the wiring to set up. They went for some modern kind of appointments down here. I don't know why they didn't also do that. That's my personal opinion, but it just seems kind of silly to have the truss rod adjustment there when it's much easier when it's just up there. But overall, I'm very happy with the guitar, and let's take it for a spin and hear how it sounds. Okay, so for this demo, I'm plugged into my Quad Cortex. I'm running a preset that's using some captures of a Tone King Imperial, so kind of a Fender-y kind of amp. This is also the tones you heard on the opening playing, so I'm using the same preset I was using for that. All I've done is turned off the delay just so you can hear more of the tone of the guitar. You're not hearing as much effect. And here's a clean tone, and I'm on the neck pickup. And one of the things I noticed about this guitar is that it's warmer than I expected it to be. I think the pickups have some kind of beef to them. And when I'm using it on my presets, the normal tones I would get out of the John Page, which tends to be a little bit more of a trebly guitar, this one has a little more mid-range and warmth to it. So I'm liking that quite a bit, but it has kind of been a little bit of an adjustment for me on the presets because it is a little bit warmer. But it still has a good amount of clarity to it. If we go to the 4 position, you get that nice quack. And then the middle pickup. And then the 2 position. And then you've got the bridge. And there's a little bit of spikiness there, but I have the tone control all the way up. So one of the things I've noticed with this guitar is the tone control for the bridge isn't super sensitive, meaning you've got to turn it down quite a bit to get it to really hear the difference in the tone. So if I go at 10, obviously go all the way to 0. If I go to 2, you see, now I'm on 3. About 3, you can hear it come back to life. And there's 5. And that's about 7 or 8. And that's... So typically on a Strat, I would put the tone control for the bridge somewhere around 7 or 8. On this one, I find I'm down more around 6, maybe even a little bit lower. So I would leave it down, you know, like this. So there's enough clarity to it, but you're not getting some of that spikiness. So I don't know why this tone control is that way. It could be maybe the capacitor in here is slightly different, but it is something I did notice. So let's go ahead and add a little bit of gain in. So this is kind of an edge of breakup tone, and I'm back on the neck pickup. This is the tone I was using in the beginning when I was doing the... in-between position. And then try the other in-between. So that sounds really good, and this guitar does really well with those kinds of tones. Let's go ahead and add more gain in. And so now we're getting into more of a crunchy kind of tone. So if I'm on the bridge, if I go to the neck, so a good throatiness there. And the in-between position works well too. And the in-between position for the 2. So a lot of usable tones in there. It does really well. That kind of neck pickup with a little more gain. It doesn't flub out too much. So let's take that same tone and we'll add in a few kind of drive stages on the front to get kind of the lead tone I was using earlier. So a nice throaty, thick tone, kind of getting those Eric Johnson-y kind of lead tones going on there. And even if we add more gain, this is not a tone that I used in the beginning part, but even with a little more gain, it still works. So overall, I'm really happy with the guitar. In terms of things I might mod along the way, I may look at swapping out the bridge just to have a narrower string spacing. So maybe buy a Callahan bridge that has the narrower spacing. I like to have strings a little further from the edge of the fretboard. It's not that the guitar is set up weird or doesn't line up. It's just with the wider string spacing, I tend to push the string over the edge of the frets just because of how I attack the strings. And so I like a narrower thing. So I may swap out the bridge. It's not that this is bad. It's just the spacing isn't ideal for me. In terms of the pickups, I like them quite a bit. I might think about swapping out the bridge for maybe like a Lawler Special or something like that that has a little more beef to it. But for now, I'm going to leave it be. You know, I have an HSS Strat, so I don't know that I need this to sound like a humbucker. But we'll see in the long term, I might look to try something different there. But the neck in the middle, I'm pretty happy with. And overall, the feel of the guitar is very nice. I was able to get it set up where I liked it. It took a few tries. I did have to take the neck off to adjust the truss rod, I think 3 separate occasions before I got it right. But once it was set up right, I like how it plays. I don't have any problems with notes fretting out because of the 7¼ inch radius. I think generally if you're having those kind of issues, my experience has been if you have too much bow in your neck, then you tend to bring the saddles down too much, and that's when your notes will start fretting out when you're bending. If you keep the neck relief minimal and keep it pretty straight, then you can get kind of a good action and still be able to bend the notes and not get the notes fretting out on you. So keep that in mind too if you're not used to these kind of necks. That's been my experience. But overall, I'm really happy with it. it really has filled that need for me of wanting to get like a really quality Strat. I think it's really good. Not only is it good on its own, but I think it's a good foundation. If I want to mod it a little bit, I can, and I won't feel like I'm kind of throwing my money away. So if you're interested in this guitar, feel free to throw some questions in the comments below. I'll answer them the best as I can. And as always, thanks for watching.